The main difference between a normal player and an advanced player in pickleball is their ability to consistently hit the ball into the kitchen. This part of pickleball is called the soft game, and it's arguably the most important thing to master if you want to improve. Two of the main shots within the soft game are the dink and the reset. Dinks are when you hit the ball in the kitchen from the kitchen, and resets are when you slow down hard shots and hit them into the kitchen, usually from the transition zone as you're moving forward. Today, I'm going to show you exactly how to use both of these. If you want to be advanced, I highly advise you know all the information I cover in this video. These shots are fundamental to an advanced strategy. You pretty much have to know them. Helping me today, I have my sister Kennedy, Andrew. And real quick guys, if you're new to our channel and trying to improve at pickleball, make sure to subscribe. All our videos are designed to get you better fast. Now though, let's talk about dinks. Before we get into that though, we need to ask ourselves, what's the goal of dinking? The goal of dinking is to lure your opponents into giving you a higher easy shot that you can accelerate on. And the reason that these dinking rallies happen is that when you hit really soft into the kitchen, your opponents have a very poor angle to attack. If I try to attack from this position, my ball will either sail out or my opponent will crush me. So when we're dinking, we're always looking for that little bit higher ball that we can attack on. One thing I'll say is that if you're in the 3-0 to 4-0 range, a lot of your opponents are not gonna like to dink and they'll stray away from dinking rallies. This doesn't mean that you shouldn't dink though. The way that you beat these types of players, bangers, is by using the soft game and outsmarting them. When it comes to dinking though, the most important part of this is where you aim the ball in the kitchen. First though, I need to cover technique. So the first part of our technique that we need to worry about is our grip. On pretty much every dink, you wanna have a continental grip where my index knuckle is on the angled notch next to this big notch that's parallel with the face of the paddle. So this angled notch and my index knuckle. This gives me the ability to go from forehand dink to backhand dink without having to change my grip, and that just makes everything so much easier. Another way to think about this grip is like you're shaking someone's hand. So you'll see when I'm dinking, I don't ever change my grip. So I'm always using this continental, and even when I go to volleys, I generally use this grip too. So whenever I'm at the kitchen, this is the grip that I want to be using. The next thing we want to think about is that whenever we're hitting the ball soft in pickleball, we want to have a very loose wrist. So it's counterintuitive here to have a firm wrist and squeeze the paddle really tight. You want to grip it loosely, and this gives you a lot more accuracy and touch. Another thing to think about is that when we're hitting dinks, we don't want to take a big backswing. The entire stroke should take place in front of our body. So I'm not taking a big backswing behind myself like this. I'm really just going like this. So everything's happening in front of me. I'm not taking a big backswing, and the stroke is very compact. Let me show you a few more examples. So I've got my compact motion, and a really important thing to keep in mind, this is probably the #1 mistake I see on dinking. With your loose wrist, you don't want to move it. So I'm actually keeping my wrist really steady throughout my shot. I'm not flopping it like this. This applies to my backhand too. So if you see, if I flop my wrist in the shot, it makes it pretty much impossible to control my shot and keep it low. So keep your wrist as steady as you can. Your paddle should stay pretty much still in your hand as you hit your dink. Your sole power source on this shot is your shoulder. So I'm literally just hinging at my shoulder, no elbow, no wrist, and that's why I'm getting 100% of my power. All coming from my shoulder. On the backhand too, so let me see some backhands. Nice. All from the shoulder. This gives you way more accuracy. This is how you hit it consistently in the kitchen without giving your opponents an easy shot that they can kill. Another really good tip to get more accuracy on your dinks is to pretend like you're drawing a line to your target with your paddle. So if I'm hitting the Kennedy's backhand directly in front of me, I'm just gonna extend my paddle straight towards my target. I don't wanna pull off of it like this. I wanna finish my dink with my paddle facing right where I wanna hit it. So you see I'm going straight towards my target, and because of that, I'm able to be pretty accurate. One more. Exactly. The next part of our technique that we want to worry about is our spin. And now we're dinking cross court, so you can dink cross court or down the line. But with our spins, we can either use top spin, where we brush up behind the ball and make it roll away from us, or slice, where we cut under the ball. So let me show you how those look. This is a top spin dink where I'm brushing up behind the ball, getting that spin. And this is a slice dink where I'm cutting under it. What you want to keep in mind is that top spin dinks are usually more aggressive, but they're a little trickier to use. Slice dinks are a little more defensive, but if you're just starting off, I wouldn't worry too much about what spin you're getting. I would just use the compact motion, and whatever spin you get should be fine. Top spin dinks and slice dinks could both be really effective, and you see pros using both. The most important thing though on your dinks is that you use the right footwork, which I'm going to go through now. So what you don't want to do when you're hitting your dinks in terms of your footwork is move like you do from the back of the court, where you turn your body and take a bunch of steps when you're moving side to side. So let me show you what you don't want to do. If I'm moving side to side, I don't want to get tangled up, cross my feet over, and get all over the place. It makes it really hard to get back into position and stay accurate. What you want to do is when you're up here, you want to take one big step in either direction to cover your side of the court. So you're only covering a 10-foot area. So you shouldn't have to take more than one big step in either direction. So as she's moving me side to side, I always stay square to the court and I try to lead with my outside leg. I don't want to do crossover like I just did. So that might happen rarely, but ideally you take a big step with your outside foot. Keeps you square to the court. It makes it a lot easier to get prepared if your opponent hits hard. So if she hits it out wide, you can see I can still get back in position quickly so that if she goes hard, I'm ready. What I don't want to do is be stuck in this position and then she hits it hard and I'm not even facing where she's hitting the ball from. So the goal with your footwork is to get prepared for the shot and be there on balance, but it's also to get back to this position as quickly as you can after you hit a good dink. Like I said though, now we need to go over where to aim the ball. And to start, let's talk about going cross court versus down the line. So whenever I'm dinking, I'm always deciding whether or not I want to go cross court at an angle like this or down the line to the person directly in front of me. What's really important to know is that going cross court is a lot safer of an option for the most part, because when I draw a line cross court, it's about twice as long as if I was to draw a line in the kitchen down the line. That's just because it's at an angle, right? But what that does is it gives me a lot more space to keep my ball in the kitchen. So I can hit my dinks a lot harder cross court and they'll stay inside of the kitchen. If I go down the line and I try to hit hard, it's a lot easier for me to give my opponent a high ball that they can kill. This doesn't mean that you should never dink down the line though. All it means is that usually you should try to take your dinks cross court, and it's actually a lot easier to hit aggressive dinks cross court, harder dinks, because you have more room. So you can just hit it a lot harder, which makes it a little bit more challenging for the person that's diagonal from you. The next thing to consider in terms of where we're aiming is how deep in the box we're hitting our dinks. So I want you to think about the kitchen in 3 zones. The first is right here, and that is called the shallow zone. You're rarely gonna hit balls into the shallow zone. It's just really close to the net. The second area is called the neutral zone. That's in the middle of the box, okay? And the third area, guys, is what's called the pressurized zone. It's in the back of the box, and it actually goes a little bit past the back of the box. So it's okay to hit your dinks a little bit past the kitchen line sometimes. So you'll notice when I'm dinking, I always am trying to aim for one of these zones. So you want to be really, really in tune with what part of the kitchen you're hitting the ball into. Those last few dinks landed in the neutral zone, but if I go deeper, that's the pressurized zone, right? And when you aim for the pressurized zone, it makes it a little bit harder for your opponents to hit a good dink back because it's right at their feet. It's a little bit more challenging for them to hit a good dink. So now though, I want to talk about the 2 main different types of dinks that you can hit when you're in a dinking rally. The first is called a push dink. These are our aggressive, harder dinks that we're aiming into the pressurized zone, and we try to use these to lure our opponents into giving us that higher, easier shot we can accelerate on. The next type of dink that we'll hit are our neutral, more defensive dinks. So these are where we aim the ball in the neutral zone generally, and that prevents our opponent from being able to attack. But when do you want to go for these 2 dinks? So push dinks are our more aggressive dinks, like I said, and you want to go for these when you have an easier dink that you have more time on. So if my opponent gives me a shorter dink that's a little bit higher, but I don't want to accelerate on it, I can go for a push dink and try to use that to get an easier shot on the next ball. But if my opponent hits a really hard dink to me and I'm out of position, it can be a little bit risky to go for a push dink from here. So what you want to do when you're out of position is go for your neutral, more defensive dink so that you can get back into position and try to go for a push dink on the next one. So when Kennedy aims her dinks deeper, I'll go shorter on mine, give myself more time to get back. But if she goes shorter, then I can be more aggressive. See, she's giving me shorter dinks. I can start to dictate and try to get that easier shot by moving her around. Now guys, we're gonna go through our top 3 dinking hacks though that just make dinking so much more effective and easier to do.
The first is if you ever have the opportunity to hit the ball in the air with what we call a volley dink, you always wanna do that instead of backing up off the kitchen here.
So what she's saying is that a lot of the time you'll get the opportunity to lean over the kitchen and hit a volley dink like this rather than back up and try to dink it like that. And it's generally always better to try to dink it out of the air just because you take away your opponent's time, and it's honestly just a lot easier to hit the ball when you don't have to move. If I'm having to run backwards and hit it, I'm gonna get off balance and I might end up hitting the ball too high, which gives my opponent an easy shot. The next hack is that when we're dinking, guys, it makes a lot of sense to target your opponent's backhand dink. Because most of the time, their backhand dink's weaker, and you'll just have more opportunities to be aggressive off their higher shots. So you see here, I'm dinking cross court, but I can go more towards the middle because Kennedy's a righty, and that gives me a straight shot to her backhand, which usually is a little bit more effective. Down the line, it looks like this. So I'm just going a little bit more to her outside. And guys, not everyone's gonna have a worse backhand dink, so you need to kind of assess whether or not this is the case with your opponents. They might also be a lefty, so you'll have to go to the other side. But this is just a good thing to think about whenever you're dinking to try to get an advantage. My last hack is more of an intricate one in relation to your technique. And it's that before you hit your dink, you wanna set your paddle's position before you start moving it towards the ball. So obviously you aim the ball by setting the angle of your wrist. So if I have my wrist angled like this, it's gonna go cross court. And if I have my wrist angled like this, it's gonna go down the line. What's really important though to keep in mind is that before you hit your shot, you wanna set the angle of your wrist before you start moving it towards the ball. If I'm flopping it into position as I'm going towards the ball, I lose pretty much all my accuracy, especially if I'm stretched out of position. So let's see how that looks. So before every dink, I set the angle of my paddle before I hit the ball. And you'll see Kennedy's getting me pretty stretched here on my backhand, and I'm trying to go cross court. So I really need to set the angle to be facing this way. So I'm kind of scooping it a little bit, right? If I was like this, I'd go down the line. And if I went and flopped while I hit the shot, I'm gonna lose all my accuracy. So when I'm getting pulled out wide, I'm getting my leg out, and I'm setting my wrist so that I can draw a line to my target. And if you guys like those 3 hacks, make sure to like this video and comment any dinking tricks that I might have missed. The only way to actually improve your dinks though is with practice. If you've made it this far in the video, now you have all the knowledge that you need to get better. You just need the repetition to dial all these things in. So the first way to practice your dinks is exactly how we're doing right now. Literally just dinking back and forth with a partner. This is one of the best ways to get repetition on an actual court. And right now we're dinking pretty easily, but as you get more advanced, you can start to be a little more aggressive and try to move your opponent around. And as you saw earlier in the video, you can do this to cross court too, which is actually probably better for the most part, but down the line is good too. The second way to practice your dinks is to simply hit against a wall. And I have the Dink Master out here to simulate this because you can see when I'm hitting the ball against the wall at the height of the net, it actually pretty much simulates a normal dink. So if you're someone that's trying to get your dinks down or just become more accurate, you can actually do a really good job on a normal wall or on the Dink Master by just getting repetition, going back and forth, aiming for targets. But the main thing you want to focus on is keeping the ball between the net and about a foot over the net. So if you can consistently keep your dinks at this height and at a slow speed, they're gonna land in the kitchen on a real court. So this is one of the best ways to just dial that in. And you see a lot of really good players doing this too. Just a really effective way to learn the dink and really focus on the technique without having to account for another player. You can also do it at home. Everyone has a wall, and if you don't have a wall, you can get one of these. Just a really great way to practice. If you're interested in trying wall drills, I actually have a full library of them on our site that apply to either the Dink Master or a normal wall. Now though, we're gonna get into resets. After this, I'll go through full court examples of everything so we can tie it all together. But first, we need to ask ourselves, what's the goal of a reset? The goal of the reset is to slow down your opponent's harder shots so that you can move forward and get into a dinking rally. So you see, by slowing down that harder ball there, I essentially took her out of being in an aggressive position, which lets me move in, and we get into a neutral position where we can start dinking. Usually you hit resets in the transition zone after you hit a drop or drive as you're moving forward. You can also hit them at the net if your opponents try to go hard to get back into a dinking situation, like that. Today though, we're gonna focus mainly on our resets from the transition zone. This is where we mainly hit them. So in a normal point, it looks something more like this. I hit my drop and I'm trying to come in, but as I'm in this transition zone area, I need to hit another shot on the way in. Usually our best option there is the reset. In that example, I actually had to hit 2 resets as I was moving forward, one in the transition zone and one a little bit closer to the kitchen. As you can see, this shot requires a lot of feel and touch, so you have to have the right technique. The technique of the reset starts with our feet. So as I'm moving forward, the first thing that I always need to do is what's called a split step. So right as my opponent's about to make contact with the ball, I want to jump into this wide position so that I can react in either direction. It's gonna be their goal to try to get me off balance out to my sides, so I need to do what I can to be able to get those shots and stay on balance. Let me show you how that looks. So So you see there, I actually had to hit 2 on the way in, and both times right before my opponent hit the ball, I did that split step, got my wide base, bent knees, and I was able to stay low and react to their shot. Next part of a good reset is having a good ready position. So when I jump into that split step, I want to have my ready position. And when you're at the kitchen, you want your ready position to be like this, where it's nice and high, about the height of the net, so you can react to volleys if you need to. But when I'm in the transition zone, guys, you want your ready position to be lower, because your opponents are going to try to aim at your feet for the most part. And if they go higher, the ball's going to go out. So when you're jumping into your split step, when you're hitting a reset, you want your paddle nice and low so that you can react to those lower shots. Let me show you how that looks. So we got our split step, our wide base, and our low ready position. How do we hit the shot? In terms of how we hit the ball, it's really similar to our dinks, but we actually want to use even less motion. So we're getting a lot of power from our opponents, so we can actually use that power to get our power, and we're trying to slow the ball down so we don't need to take too much of a swing. So let me show you how a normal reset motion looks. Really isn't much going on. I'm essentially just doing the bare minimum that I can with my shoulder to get the ball to go just over the net. Barely taking any swing. It's the same on the backhand. So just like our dinks, you don't want to use any wrist or elbow. You don't want really any backswing here. You should start from right behind the ball, take just enough of a swing so that you get the ball to go over the net. Put that all together and it looks like this. In terms of where you aim the ball, your sole goal in the reset is to make your opponents hit the ball up. So you essentially want them to be making contact with the ball below the height of the net. It's really hard to aim your resets because it's obviously not that easy of a shot, so we don't want to be too specific with where we're hitting the ball. All I focus on is getting it about a foot over the net, so give yourself a little bit of space, about a foot over the net. You want to try to make it land towards the back portion of the kitchen. I wouldn't aim too close to the net because that makes it more likely you'll miss in the net. I aim for the back portion of the kitchen, and it's totally fine if your opponent can volley it as long as they have to hit the ball up. So just aim for the back portion of the kitchen, about a foot over the net. One thing I'll say is that it's really hard to use your soft game if your partner's being a banger. So make sure to send them this video so that they can learn how to do dinks and resets too. Now guys, we're gonna do some full court examples. There, I had to hit a reset on the way in. It was actually a volley reset, so you can do resets out of the air too. Then we got in a little bit of a dinking battle, but I won the point because Kennedy ended up missing her dink. There I hit 2 good resets on the way in, but I got a little bit antsy, went for a speed up when I should have hit a dink, and I missed it long. There, I hit another good reset, had a pretty easy shot coming in. Hit 1 dink, Drew decided to speed up, and I counterattacked right at him. Oh. There, I had a reset on the way in, and then Drew sped up at me. I hit a volley reset from the kitchen. We got into a little bit of a dinking battle, but I decided to go for the around the post shot. Didn't have the right angle, and I missed it. There, Kennedy went for the reset, but she hit it too high, so Drew had the opportunity to kill the ball. There, Kennedy hit a good reset on the way in. We got into a dinking battle. She went for a speed up, and maybe she shouldn't have, and I was able to counterattack, and I got the point. There, Kennedy hit some good resets on the way in. We got into that dink battle, but I used that one trick I told you earlier. Hit to her backhand dink. She actually missed it, so I got the point from that. There, Kennedy hit a great reset on a hard roll from us, got in, and she was able to attack on her first shot from the kitchen, and she won the point. If you've made it this far in the video, you now know 2 out of the 3 shots that make up our soft game. If you want to learn the last piece of the puzzle though, watch this.